Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Kris. See me click that thumbs up? If you could do the same for me, that helps out tremendously. You can subscribe to the channel if you'd like, and you can donate through the thanks button. You can also request videos, and your name will be sponsoring if you donate and have a request. This is a collection of Horrible Fates by Scary Interesting. I've done a couple videos on the channel. I really like it. I've got a feeling nothing here is going to be pleasurable, so let's just go ahead and get into it.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Scary Interesting and to another collection of Horrible Fates. In this video, we're going to go over two stories that, as the stories progress, you're going to get a creeping sense of dread about what's going on. Unfortunately, whether or not you guess correctly, as you'll see, the events are horrifying nonetheless. And as always, viewer discretion is advised. For everyone we come across in our lives, there's the person we know and the person who exists when no one is looking. And we've likely all heard stories, both true and fictional, that serve to teach us that appearances can be deceiving. But sometimes what happens behind closed doors is too terrible to remain there. If you didn't know any better, you might assume Pentti and Hilkka Saarinen were an idyllic Finnish family. The couple owned a historic home that Hilkka inherited from her grandparents, and they had 5 beautiful, healthy children together. To anyone who didn't live in the area, the Saarinens seemed to have it all, but the truth was actually so brutal that longtime residents couldn't avoid the stories that leaked out of the old wooden house. After all, the absence of 5 children is difficult to ignore. Things were so bad that each of Pentti and Hilkka's children had been adopted by the state, removed from the house, and placed into foster care as a result. The reason for this was Pentti. He had a reputation for 2 things, alcohol and violence, and the two often mixed with explosive results. If he wasn't swinging at one of the kids, he was making Hilkka's life a living hell. Like, for example, one night, for reasons unknown, he apparently shoved her head in a bucket filled with what we'll just call human waste. On another occasion, while having dinner one night, the quiet at the table was interrupted by the sound of a clanging fork after Pentti threw it at Hilkka from across the table. His reasoning for this was that, in his assessment, she was eating like a pig. Pentti quickly found out that it was difficult to keep incidents like this inside the family, but he didn't seem to care who knew about his fits of rage and physical violence. Many years later, on Christmas Day in 1960, Pentti and Hilkka's eldest son arrived at the house for a holiday visit a day earlier than expected, and he brought a schoolmate with him. Unfortunately, there's no name listed for the son, so he'll be referred to as Enslo. Enslo found that the front door was unlocked, so he turned the knob and pushed the door open before the two entered the home and stood in the front hallway. Upon hearing the door creak open, Pentti suddenly appeared at the far end of the hallway with a nervous look on his face. Since the couple wasn't expecting visitors on Christmas Day, Enslo first thought he had just startled his father, but Pentti was clearly in the middle of something he didn't want the boys to see. As he shut and locked the kitchen door behind him, Pentti complained about their early arrival. Enslo ignored the remark and asked where his mother was. And Pentti, who was standing in front of the kitchen door as if to block the boys from entering it, told Enslo that she had left while he was sleeping the night before and he hadn't seen her all day. Now, although he didn't grow up under their care, Enslo knew it wasn't like Hilkka to just up and leave without telling anyone where she was going. But, sensing his father's impatience, Enslo accepted the answer and took his schoolmate to the guest room. As bedtime approached, Enslo needed to grab some extra bed sheets from his parents' room, which was located off the kitchen. When he walked into the kitchen, however, he flipped on the light switch, but nothing happened. He then called out to his father to ask what was wrong with the light, and Pentti replied that the lamp was broken. This was another odd response because when Enslo arrived, he could see the kitchen light was on through the crack between the bottom of the door and the floorboards. But either way, using the light from the hallway to at least see where they were going in the kitchen, it was obvious to Enslo that something was very off about the room. In the middle of it was a large wood-burning oven connected to a stone chimney. It hadn't been operational for almost 8 years, and over that time, it had been a catch-all for stacks of mail, newspapers, and other miscellaneous items. Everything that had once been piled on top of it, though, was now scattered all over the floor, and the stonework just looked different than Enslo remembered it. He then asked Pentti what happened, and keeping with the theme, Pentti made a strange claim that he'd been cleaning the kitchen in the dark when Enslo arrived, and he must have knocked everything off the oven. There was no way that could have been true for several reasons. Again, Enslo saw the kitchen light on when he arrived, so Pentti definitely wasn't cleaning in the dark. But beyond that, Enslo knew Pentti wasn't cleaning at all because never once did he lift a finger to clean anything in his life. He viewed that kind of housework as Hilkka's job. And even more, as they spoke, Enslo noticed that there was a pretty sizable scrape wound on Pentti's hand. But considering all the strange answers he had received to his questions so far, Enslow didn't mention it. Throughout the visit as well, Penty kept a sharp eye on the two boys, both in everything they did and everywhere they went. To Enslow, his father seemed extremely paranoid ever since he arrived, and his demeanor creeped the schoolmate out so much that he actually decided to leave the house early. And for the rest of Enslow's stay, Hilke never did show up to the house, and Penty seemed completely unfazed by this. Any other questions about her whereabouts from Enslow were met with indifference by his father, and after long enough, Enslow realized that he had to drop it to avoid one of Penty's famous violent outbursts. Over the next few years, Enslow would come by his parents' house to visit, and each time he did, his mother was nowhere to be found. Penty stuck by his claim that she simply disappeared in the early morning hours of Christmas Day 1960 and never came back. Considering how awful Penty was, it was a completely plausible story, but it just didn't seem right to Enslow. So during his visits, Enslow would check the house and inspect the grounds, hoping to find some clue that would back up his suspicions that Penty was behind Hilke's disappearance. He checked the floorboards, the roof, the attic, and even the foundation, but found...
So he's already on to... She didn't leave, so he had to have killed her. How... Can anyone here imagine that your parent disappears and instead of calling the police or getting the cops involved, you take it upon yourself to walk the grounds and look for any disturbances or things like... Can you imagine? Forget the police, okay? Just you take it upon yourself to find what would be a burial, because you just know, yeah, he probably would have killed her. Like, just the thought that would be just so commonly like, nah, he probably would have. Like, that is bonkers to me. And to be so casual about it, like, I would never want to return to that house.
Nothing out of the ordinary until one day he checked the walls near the oven chimney. Closer to the area where the wall meets the ceiling, he could feel grit like small stones and pebbles through the wallpaper, which was odd. Then, as he walked the property that day, Enslow realized that a mound of sand that once sat near the cow barn was gone. And much like the oven, the sand pile hadn't been touched in years, and now suddenly it had disappeared without explanation. Enslow couldn't shake the feeling that the missing sand pile and the gritty texture on the wall near the chimney were connected somehow, but he'd have to be careful. If Penty caught wind of Enslow's suspicions, he knew his father was capable of anything when he went into a rage. After Enslow returned to school from one visit, he pulled out a piece of paper and began writing a letter. In it, he briefly described what he had seen and experienced in several visits to his parents' home, and when it was finished, he sealed it in an envelope and addressed it to the local police station. At the very end of this letter, he suggested that police come to the house and dismantle the oven as part of an investigation into Hilke's disappearance. But much to Enslow's disappointment and surprise, the police did absolutely nothing about his letter. In May of 1967, which was by then a year after writing to police with no response, Enslow sat down to write another letter. This time, he went into great detail about everything and mailed it to a popular Finnish magazine, which published the letter as an article entitled, "I suspect my father is a murderer." In it, Enslow shared his belief that Hilke was dead and that Penty was responsible for it, but he had to be careful to change names, dates, and other details that might expose him as the letter writer. He even wrote it under an assumed name and was satisfied when he sent it off that he had covered up just enough detail that the article couldn't be tied back to him. Shortly after the article was published, however, Enslow visited again, and the first thing Penty said to him was, "Let's just both mind our business." Penty provided no further context than that, but he didn't need to. He clearly knew that Enslow had written the magazine article, and now Enslow felt like his life was in danger. But incredibly, the letter to the magazine, just like the letter to police, produced no further attention on Hilke's disappearance, and it seemed like there would be nothing further until one day in 1972. This is when police came under an order to review and solve cold cases, and Hilke's disappearance was one of them. In her file was the letter that Enslow had written to police years earlier, and that's when he was finally contacted by authorities. On November 27th that year, Penty received an unexpected knock at the door, and when he went to answer it, he was stunned to see a group of policemen waiting outside. He was presented with a document that authorized authorities to check the house, particularly the oven, and with that, Penty was put in the back of a police car and taken to the police station while the search of his property took place. Before checking anything else, police went to examine the oven, and when one of them opened the oven's front door, sand poured out of it and piled on the hearth beneath it. Stone by stone, the oven was dismantled, and about 3 feet or 1 meter into the oven chamber, police found a mummified head belonging to a woman. Then, after the careful removal of more of the sand, they also uncovered a human foot. Once photos of the scene were taken, the coroner removed the body, and Enslow came to the medical examiner's office the next day to positively identify it as his mother. Penty was then immediately arrested and charged with Hilke's murder. At trial, Penty maintained his innocence and even claimed that vagrants had broken into the house.
Sorry, did he say Enzi was charged?
Identified as his mother. Penty, the medical examiner's office. Once photos of the scene were taken, the coroner removed the body, and Enslow came to the medical examiner's office the next day to positively identify it as his mother. Penty was then immediately arrested and charged with Hilke's murder.
Why was Enzi? Did they mean the father? I can't even say his name.
At trial, Penty maintained his innocence and even claimed that vagrants had broken into the house before Christmas in 1960 and proposed that they were
I'm guessing that was a name screw up.
Responsible for her death, but no one was buying it. His long history of mistreatment toward Hilke was too widely known for him to pull the wool over anyone's eyes and manipulate the situation further. But unfortunately, although the prosecution had a strong circumstantial case, in terms of actually proving Penty killed Hilke in a court of law, things weren't so clear-cut. Yes, Penty was terrible and violent, and yes, Hilke was found inside the oven in the house they shared, but the judge acknowledged that there was no undeniable proof that Penty killed Hilke.
She may have just fell into the oven while it was going and covered herself up. That's very possible. I've seen it several times.
Stuffed her in the oven. So, when the verdict came in, it sent shockwaves through the whole country. Penty was found to be responsible for her death, but the court stopped short of declaring him a murderer. Instead, he received an 8-year sentence for manslaughter and ruled Hilke's death accidental. Penty would then serve just 1 year of that sentence because the Supreme Court of Finland overturned his conviction. This was because the statute of limitations on accidental death was up before Penty was arrested and charged, so he apparently never should have been tried and convicted in the first place in the eyes of the law. After this ruling, he was released and immediately returned to the home to live out the rest of his days alone. To the community afterward, he became known as Freemason, which was a reference to his alleged work to dismantle and reassemble the oven with Hilke inside. Penty passed away in 1986 and the house was destroyed in 2015. And with the overturned conviction, the case of what happened to Hilke is still officially unsolved.
What? What do you mean it's unsolved? There's no accident. He killed her. Either by accident or not, she's dead because of him. It's pretty clear cut to me.
On January 4th, 2005, a sheriff's deputy in Sarpy County, Nebraska, parked his patrol car near the entrance to an old gravel pit, put his hat on, and stepped outside. He shivered as he was immediately hit by sub-zero wind chill and heavy snow. Then, pulling out his flashlight, he flicked it on, but with how hard the snow was falling and blowing, he could barely see his hands in front of him. Located to the immediate south of Omaha, which is the state's most populous city, Sarpy County and the surrounding area were getting hit by the first big storm of the new year. And unluckily for the officer, he was on a bit of a wild goose chase and he had no idea who he was looking for or if he was even in the right place. But based on the information provided to him by 911 operators, the old Lyman Ritchie gravel pit sounded like it fit the description. As he continued ahead, he almost walked right into a closed gate before he saw it. Looking around the area, the deputy was searching for anything that might indicate he was in the right spot. However, just as he was about to give up, he noticed footprints in the snow that he was sure didn't belong to him. The heavy snowfall had started to fill them in, but they still looked relatively fresh. So for a quarter mile afterward, the deputy followed the tracks until they suddenly stopped at a frozen pond. He shined his light around the area, but again, the snow just wouldn't allow him to see more than a few feet ahead of him. And then, just as he was about to explore the area more closely, a message came over the radio from dispatch alerting those on duty to a new location that needed to be checked out. So with one last look, the deputy turned around and headed back to his car. Just 2 days earlier, a man named Michael was behind the wheel of his girlfriend's 2000 Ford Ranger pickup truck when he swerved in front of another truck going the same direction. The accident caused significant damage to the bed of the driver's side as the other truck slammed into the Ranger and sent it into a large signpost. Needless to say, Michael was not looking forward to the phone call he'd have to make to his girlfriend Janelle. The couple had been close friends since the 7th grade, but they didn't start dating until they each turned 19. By then, they were both 20 years old and sharing an apartment together, and they were closer than ever. She was a beautiful young woman, and she was smart and accomplished and athletic. In high school, she excelled on the cheerleading squad, participated in drama club, and sang in the choir. By 2005, she was in her junior year of university, where she was a member of a sorority as well as a business fraternity. Overall, the future for Janelle just looked really bright. In contrast, Michael hadn't quite figured out his purpose yet. Until that time came, he was happy to work his landscaping job and tinker with old cars. But either way, thankfully, in the end, Janelle took the news of her wrecked truck surprisingly well, and she was just happy that Michael was okay. Their troubles on the road were far from over though. The next night, they were driving together when they were pulled over by the police for a traffic stop. The couple also happened to be lost, so after getting the ticket, Michael asked the officer for assistance. He then kindly gave them directions at the end of the traffic stop and sent them on their way. As it approached 12:30 a.m. on January 4th, Sarpy County 911 operatives were well into a busy night shift. This was thanks to the storm that was expected to dump 14 inches of snow in the area overnight. Temperatures were also well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 18 degrees Celsius when factoring wind chill, and to no one's surprise, there was always an uptick in calls when conditions were that dangerous. By then, the number of calls had been steady but manageable, but that was all about to change. At 12:28 a.m., the phone rang at the dispatch center and an operator picked up and asked where the emergency was located. The young woman's voice on the other end sounded anxious and frightened as she said hello and told the operator that she wanted to report that she felt very threatened. It was an odd statement with no context offered at all until the young woman said she was at the Mandalay apartment complex in Omaha. The woman on the phone was Janelle, and the complex was where she and Michael shared an apartment. Strangely, she didn't tell the operator what she felt threatened by, but Janelle was adamant about where she was. The operator could see on her screen that the caller was on a cell phone, but the cell tower the call was transmitted through was nowhere near the couple's apartment. The operator then asked Janelle to hold on as she transferred the call to Omaha Dispatch, figuring that it would be better handled in that area and that it would soon be over. Things that night, however, were only just getting started. At 1 o'clock, the phone at the Sarpy County Dispatch rang again, and this time it was Michael. He told the operator that his girlfriend had called earlier and that they needed help at the old sandpit located at the corner of 75th and Poppleton in Omaha. According to Michael, Janelle's truck was stolen and the couple went out to look for it on foot, but now they were lost. Now, without any knowledge of Omaha, this might sound like a reasonable emergency call, but there were a few things wrong with what Michael told her, not the least of which was that there was no old sandpit located at 75th and Poppleton. Once again, the location of the cell tower the call was coming from was nowhere near where Michael was saying they were. Not only that, but if the couple was within Omaha city limits, their call should have gone to Omaha Dispatch. This ability to see where a cell phone is coming from was integrated into 911 emergency services in 1996 by order of the FCC. Prior to this, the vast majority of emergency calls came from landlines, which have addresses attached to them, so even if someone wasn't able to give their exact location over the phone, operators would still know where the emergency was. The rise in popularity of cell phones in the late 1990s, however, took that functionality out of the equation. Even though most cell phone numbers are associated with a specific address, this wasn't terribly helpful if a caller wasn't at their address when contacting 911. Today, obviously, almost every cell phone has a GPS built in, which allows for location of a call to be determined with reasonable accuracy. In 2005, however, this technology was just starting to come into use, so often 911 operators would only see a general location associated with the call from the cell phone towers, but this information is a little bit vague. In an area with multiple towers, a phone will often connect to more than one, and this can make determining the location more accurate. About the best a 911 operator could hope for in 2005 would be a 3-tower call, and the location is determined through what's called cell tower triangulation. Even with this system though, the location of a call can only be determined within the radius of about 3/4 of a mile, which again is more vague than you'd like during a search. Anyways, in those early morning hours of January 4th, 2005, operators had a general picture of where Michael and Janelle's calls were coming from based on cell tower location data. The area was in the outskirts of Omaha, but remote compared to the populated area their apartment was located within. Michael also struggled to find identifying landmarks that might help operators determine a more exact location, and his insistence that they were near their apartment in Omaha unnecessarily widened the search area. And over the course of multiple calls after 12:28, Michael and Janelle insisted they were near their apartment more than 22 times, but there was just no way this was true. Even if operators disregarded the cell phone tower location data, what little Michael could describe about their surroundings did not match up with their claims at all. Michael said that he and Janelle had taken shelter in a structure that looked like a toll booth and that they were at an abandoned lakefront near an old sand or gravel pit. But a location like this description just didn't exist inside Omaha city limits. It was clear to several operators Michael and Janelle spoke to that night that the couple was scared and confused, but even in their frightened state, some of what they were saying was just downright bizarre. During one call, Michael said he could see a shack and the operator told him to go toward it, but Michael said he couldn't because it was surrounded by dogs. Then he claimed that there were two people.
Are they on drugs? That's the only thing I'm thinking of. They're on drugs, unless both of them are having some sort of medical emergency where they're maybe they didn't take medication or something like that, and now it's really triggered, which would be odd that both of them would be doing this. But but that's twins. I know that there is a medical condition where like one twin can just go through some weird delusions, and the other one has the same thing. Like it's like a shared delusion. I don't know if couples could do that, but I don't know. I mean, unless they are really lost. And even, I mean, like so lost, they don't know where they are in terms of where they're calling from and where they're. But then, how do you get that lost? Because you're lost in the city. All you got to do is look at a street and okay, I'm here. I'm confused.
On top of the shack, flashing a light at them. The operator instructed him to walk toward them, but Michael said the people wouldn't talk to them because they didn't speak English. The operator could also tell, based on the sound of the wind, that the couple was outside and no longer in the shelter of the toll booth, so she urged them to return to the truck. Michael then said that they couldn't because the truck had flipped over, which was not something he or Janelle had mentioned to that point. Before this call ended, Michael told her that he saw 100 to 200 people in a field, but they wouldn't help the couple. By this point in the night, it was minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 23 degrees Celsius with the wind chill, and the snow was still blinding. This made it highly unlikely that so many people would be gathered in such a remote location in the middle of the night, so something extremely odd was going on. Around 2 a.m., Michael placed another call to 911. This time, Janelle could be heard saying that she saw people disassembling cars and placing the parts in trees. She'd later call 911 and report seeing people dressed in cult clothing, as she put it, who were moving vehicles around. Then, the final call operators received came at 4:20 a.m. It was Michael, and he said he had just escaped and asked the police to open the gates. Again, there was no context about what he escaped from or what gates he expected police to open. What little sense the couple made during their many calls to 911 did allow police to make an educated guess about where they might be. Outside of Omaha, there were several sand and gravel pits owned by the Lyman Ritchie Company. When he heard the descriptions dispatchers were communicating to officers from Michael and Janelle, the sheriff's deputy had a hunch that they were at the company's Gretna, Nebraska location just southwest of Omaha. And in fact, when he arrived at the gate he thought they were referring to, he found the couple's footprints. After he reached the pond where the footprints came to an abrupt stop, he received the call from dispatch about heading to another search area. Tragically, he was just steps away from Michael and Janelle. The gate that Michael had asked police to open was likely the same one that the police officer had accidentally walked into. The next day, Michael was found 1.5 miles from Janelle's pickup truck, just off-road near the Platte River. It's believed he froze to death shortly after the couple made their final call to 911. It would be almost a week before Janelle's body was found, also along the sand road next to a gate and near a sand pile, both of which were landmarks Michael had given to operators. At several points that night, Michael and Janelle were just feet from safety. The toll booth structure they temporarily sheltered in was actually a heated gatehouse near one of the pit's entrances. Also, if they had headed southwest from Janelle's truck, they would have been near a heated machine shed at one point, yet the couple continued to trudge through the rapidly accumulating snow with seemingly no particular destination. The question on everybody's mind was, how could something like this happen? The couple may have been lost, scared, and confused, but that didn't seem to explain the unusual things they reported seeing. Undoubtedly, however, their certainty that they were close to their apartment and the odd things they reported seeing caused confusion to spread to 911 operators and police hoping to find them. Later, physical examinations performed on both 20-year-olds revealed very little about their mental condition that night, but when the toxicology report came in, everything started to make sense. According to lab results, Michael and Janelle were under the influence of a strong illicit stimulant that's known to cause hallucinations and can last for over 12 hours. It can even cause people to hear and see things that aren't there, which explains Michael and Janelle's reports of dogs and cult members in a field the night they died. Per the toxicology report, Janelle had more than 3 times more in her system than Michael had, but it was clear to 911 operators that they were both heavily under the influence. Understandably, news of Janelle's substance use shocked family, friends, classmates, and professors. No one saw any signs of any drug use by Janelle, let alone something as strong as what was found in her system. In fact, those close to her believed that the night she died was the first time she used the drug, making it all that much more tragic. In the aftermath of their deaths, a mother and son were arrested on suspicion of possessing the substance Michael and Janelle used. Apparently, on the night of January 3rd, so just before they were stopped by the police officer for a traffic violation, the couple allegedly took the drug at a house shared by the mother and son. Both received probation for felony possession, but neither was charged in connection with Michael and Janelle's deaths. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching.
Wow. Yeah, that one ended tragically. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it was drugs was the only thing I could think of. I just didn't realize it could be that bad. But she had 3 times the amount 3 times the amount that he had. And if he's, but he was giving good directives in a way, like he was identifying things. She was out there with disassembling cars and putting parts in trees, but you don't know that clearly when you call or when you're taking the call. But wow, that is sad. All right, well, this is a well done video. Unfortunately, it's a true one. I always say I hope you liked the video. I don't mean I hope you enjoyed. I have to say that. I hope you don't enjoy the death. I hope you enjoy the video for what it is, and I hope you learned not to do that. But anyways, until the next time, have a good day, have a good night.